Hey folks, welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast. We are recording this from the Health Optimization Summit here in Austin, Texas. And I'm sitting across from Rachel Pastor and Tiffany Hurd. Tiffany has been on the podcast before talking about microdosing in more business, entrepreneurial, corporate environments. And she's been collaborating with Rachel on a project. They are representatives of Golden Rule mushrooms. And so this will be the first podcast that we've done to really explore what does it mean to be a microdosing company that is providing this to the broader public. What does that look like? What are some of the challenges that must be navigated as part of that? And we've been spending the day together, and Tiffany and I have known each other for some time. So anyway, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us, Tiffany and Rachel.
Thanks so much for having us. Really excited to be here.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, let's start with you for the sort of opening. I'd love just if you could share a little bit about your background, what's brought you into this work, and how microdosing has, personally impacted you and what it's done for you.
Yeah. So I really think that this begins for me a long time ago between the ages of 15 and 20. Between the ages of 15 and 20, I was a heroin addict, and I was homeless during that time. And I really got into, people always are curious of how I ended up using heroin at 15, but I was really anxious, I was really depressed, and I really was just looking to feel better. And I, the very first time I tried it, I felt like I found the relief that I was always looking for. And the addiction just progressed pretty quickly into shooting it up, and then my life just turned pretty quickly over the 5 years. And at 20, my boyfriend that I had been an addict with the whole 5 years, he passed away from an overdose. So it really was like a death or change moment for me. I felt completely lost because everybody in my life, I didn't have anybody in my life. He truly was the only person in my life. And so when he passed away, I really didn't have any will to live. I was really done with life. I felt like I had already tried to change many times. I had been in and out of methadone clinics and rehabs, and I didn't really see a future for me. And at that time, I literally got down on my knees and I prayed to a God that I didn't even know if I believed in. And I really was like, either please take me out, I'm done, or help me. And I ended up getting enough money to buy a one-way ticket to Hawaii. I took everything I had in a backpack, and I told myself, when I get off this plane, I'll never use again. And I didn't, and I wish I could say that it was really easy after that, but it was years and years of just identity shift and transformation, and really, really uncomfortable because my identity was so into being a homeless heroin addict. And I didn't, and also in very informative years. And so I didn't even really know how other people interacted with one another. I would literally just go sit on the beach and watch families interact with one another. And so my boss, Mimi, she invited me to go to the gym. And Mimi wanted to lose weight. And when she invited me, I thought, who in the hell would want to go work out at a gym? Like, that was so far from anything in my mind. And especially go walk on a treadmill. Like, it just seemed weird. But I really, really wanted a friend. I needed a healthy relationship. I had no friends. So we walked on the treadmill. It was great. We're having this great conversation. We left. Believe it or not, I felt like much better. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go back and do that. So I kept going back. Before I knew it, I was sitting on a cycling bike in cycling class. Lights go down, music goes up, and everybody's hooting and hollering and just this energy. And I just start pushing and pushing and pushing. I leave there on cloud 9. Endorphins just kicking. I get in my car, I roll my windows down, and I just remember this like it's yesterday because it's when my mission in life was really born. And I'm like, whatever drug I just took, I want to bring this to the world. And it felt, it like that became my mission to bring the joy of wellness to the world. And so I did that. I went back to school. I moved back to Colorado. I worked in the health and fitness industry for 15 years. I had gyms. I worked in personal training. I worked for Chris and Heidi Powell on ABC Weight Loss Edition. We helped thousands of people around the world. And then I started my own coaching company. And then I, at that time, had Colorado's largest fitness festival. And I was just on a mission. But while I was on this mission, the reason I became a heroin addict in the first place, there was so much trauma. Yeah. There was all the depression, all the anxiety, all of it was still there. So, yeah, I had discovered fitness and it did make me feel good, but it wasn't healing me. There was so much to be worked through. And it really, for me, popped up that I noticed it the most. I would say there's probably various areas in my life. It showed up in relationships and things like that. But I think more than anything, it was my leadership. So it was really when I started to put myself in these leadership roles that all my insecurities, all my fears, like all of these things started to pop up for me. And I was just in anxiety all of the time and in fear all the time. And so I remember I did the first fitness festival I ever did. It was incredible. We rented out a stadium, shut down all the streets around it. And I had this amazing team. And when it was over, I remember going to my team and being like, let's do it again. And every single one of them was like, no, thanks. And it had nothing to do with the event. It had everything to do with me and how I was showing up in the world. And so it led me on this deep journey of like self-discovery and really trying to uncover why I didn't feel good and really how I was showing up, what they were seeing. So that led me on a path of a lot of, I started doing Joe Dispenza. I went to a couple of his retreats and became a master of neurolinguistic programming because I was just fascinated around how we could shift our minds. And then that led me into psychedelics. So it was kind of like this rabbit hole. And I started to microdose. At that time, as I'm in this rabbit hole, so I'm in the rabbit hole, I decided, I was like, I'm done with fitness. And I was done with fitness, not because it's, helping people with fitness and nutrition is great and it's needed. But for me, what I saw is in working with people is that if they're not right in their heart and their head, if something is not right, if they're going to continue to live back into the same loops over and over and over again, that's exactly why, if somebody wants to lose the weight, maybe they do, but they gain it all back or they can't lose it in the first place. They're just constantly living in these loops. So once I learned that, I was like, I can't just hand somebody a fitness and nutrition plan anymore. And so I ended up letting go of my companies. I let go of the festival. And I just truly was on a free fall into, I don't know what's next for me, but I was on my own healing journey and also allowing God to guide me into whatever was next. And so I'm microdosing. I go to my first ayahuasca ceremony. My husband also, he had left his job as a police officer. He was doing that for 10 years. He had just left, and we're both just in this complete free fall. And we go to this ayahuasca ceremony, and it's just truly, by the end, shown to me really that my mission hasn't changed. It's just in the way that I'm doing it has changed. And it really was showing to me that how do you bridge the gap? So how do you help every day, like anybody and everybody, somebody like me, a 41-year-old mom living in the suburbs, to feel comfortable and safe to use this beautiful medicine. And it felt very clear to me in a way to do that, because I feel like there was a separation. Like it feels too weird to a lot of people. It feels very disconnected. And a lot of the brands at that time out there that were speaking to psychedelics, felt very like, I get why they create it that way. I do, because it can be what you experience. But for somebody who totally is already scared of it or doesn't know their belief system around it, it doesn't attract them to feel safe to do it and experience it. So it's kind of like leaving them out. And so I really wanted to find a way to do that. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I mean, coming out of a heroin addiction, going cold turkey, Hawaii, I imagine, must have been beautiful medicine. And then, like you said, these lifestyle habits around fitness and nutrition, they're important, but there can still be things that are underneath the surface. And, one of the things that I love about Golden Rule is the brand and the sort of the aesthetic of how it's presented and the professionalism behind it. And so, Tiffany, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about Golden Rule. What is Golden Rule? What is it as a brand? What is it as a company? Both being very, practical in what it is, but also maybe talking a little bit about what's the mission and vision behind Golden Rule.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rachel, thank you for your beautiful story. I always love when you share your story. So, Golden Rule is a woman-ran company, which is amazing. And it's a microdosing company. There's also macrodosing products at a lower macrodosing dose. But really, the mission is to serve, to educate, to inform a community of people who are working with psychedelics to understand how to effectively and intentionally work with psychedelics, to receive the most optimized outcome that they possibly can with whatever it is that they're coming to work with psychedelics for. And, a lot of people that are listening, you as well, it's one thing to have a product. So we're a product-based company and we have incredible product, but to understand how to utilize this product is where you really optimize a lot of things in your life. And so that's a lot of what we do through education. I run the programs. We have a microdosing program that we run that's amazing. A lot of education, community Q&As, making sure that our community is informed of how to work with the product that we're serving, essentially.
And so tell us a little bit about the products. Like, what are those products? And I imagine a lot of listeners maybe have heard about these kind of microdosing brands or companies that have started up or gotten going. Tell us a little bit about, what do you make available? What is accessible through Golden Rule? And what type of education and sort of structure do you provide around those products that you're providing?
Yes, so we have microdosing products with psilocybin mushrooms. We have single strains. We have stacking strains and a family of those strains with different milligrams of psilocybin that you can work with, anywhere from 125 milligrams to 350. We have an amazing LSD product as well. We have two of those, which is 10 milligram option and then a 30 milligram option as well.
10 micrograms.
Micrograms, excuse me. Micrograms.
If you took 10 milligrams of acid, I want to be with you on that day.
We also have chocolates, and we have those in microdoses as well. And then we also have macrodosing, 1.5 grams, something where if someone wants to go a little bit deeper into their experience, they've been working with microdosing for quite some time and are feeling like, hey, I want to go a little bit deeper into, unlocking something within myself, navigating something personal, what have you. That creates a really beautiful at-home experience where you're not in a heroic dose, but you're simply in a dose where 1.5 grams can absolutely be a high dose for many people. But for those that, are experienced, it's nice to have that option as well. So we provide that as well. And then as far as education, it's really educating on the product. It's educating how to work with the product. It's education around how to bring in certain modalities that can optimize the product and the performance and the productivity and the personal experience that you're looking to have with it.
And those LSD gummies are the Soul and Super Soul gummies. And I mention that because they're my favorite.
Mine too.
And, I took one this morning of the Soul, the 10 micrograms. And
not milligrams?
And right. And it's like a pineapple mango flavor is how I experience it. Yeah. And it's a really nice, subtle, energetic lift. And the listeners are aware that, LSD is probably my favorite. I know in the sort of overall discourse, we talk a lot more about mushrooms.
Yeah.
because mushrooms are, anyone can grow mushrooms, and they are now legal in Oregon and Colorado. But there's something very special about LSD in these very, very low doses, I find, that for folks who do want to explore that as an option, that's one reason why we partnered with Golden Rule, is because they provide both these really dialed in strains for mushrooms, but there's also the soul and the super soul gummies. So Rachel, I want to go back to you now. And, you, like you said, you're a 41-year-old mother of two. Your husband used to be a police officer, and you live in Colorado. And as many of our listeners know, Colorado has legalized a number of psychedelics through the Natural Medicine Health Act. Yet there's still a very quasi-legal, we could call it the gray area around microdosing and products and whatnot. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, just being involved with Golden Rule and, kind of supporting it. What are some of the things that you've just had to navigate personally in deciding to build a company like this and provide these substances to people who need it and kind of come out to the world, not in a huge, big way, but in a way that is still, you're standing pretty firm behind these medicines that at this point in time are not, legal everywhere necessarily.
Yeah, I think that when I decided to come in and work with Golden Rule and be a representative of it, I really think that I had no idea what what we were going to face. And so I think I went into it pretty naive. But I would say that, a lot of what we've faced is, one, payment stuff. I mean, that's been a big thing. And people in this space or people in the weed industry or, there's even peptides face all the same things, but it really is a special area, and there's so much to learn there.
And what you mean by that is payment processors. It can be
Yes.
hard to get approval by a payment processor.
Exactly.
To make it easy for people to be able to purchase and access these substances.
Yes, exactly. So payment processing, also just in the way that we market. So it's, it's different from another business in that you can't just market it freely. You really have to be cautious about that, and they'll shut you down really fast, even just for speaking to, especially on the product side. Yeah.
Right. Like Meta ads or Google ads or like you had your Instagram banned some time ago. We did as well for Third Wave, and we're just an educational brand, but Meta really cracked down on these companies 6 months ago or so. And so you have some of the challenges with marketing. What about, being a mother of two kids and, having a husband and having a normal life? Like, being part of a microdosing company is it's a bit of a risk to take in that way. So how do you sort of hold that and navigate that and sort of move with that?
Yeah. Well, I always go back into the intention of why I started. So every single morning I really pull into the intention. Yeah. And which is, it's so interesting in that, but not interesting at all, because it makes total sense, is that when you do use the medicine, you need to set an intention. It's been no different than when I work with the medicine and the business. It's every single day setting the intention and really remembering that. To me, I don't think it should be any different than a wellness supplement you would buy at Whole Foods. I mean,
creatine or lion's mane or ashwagandha or rhodiola or...
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it's a little, I think in a constant shift of perspective, you start to see things so differently in that, it truly is, I think you said it the other day on your Instagram. I mean, this is the real medicine. Yeah. Yeah. And when you really start to see it in that way, I think things just begin to shift, and so that's how I personally navigate it. But it's just been a constant shift. And for my husband, it's been a longer shift because he comes from, a military background and a police background. And so that's been a longer shift. He still is working through that. But we've been married for 15 years and together for 16. And from the minute we got together, I mean, I've always been more into anything natural. So I think that he's kind of just been used to that. I'm not. Maybe some other things that people will do, maybe when they're sick. I'll typically take the more natural route in anything that I do. So I think that for him, it hasn't seemed too strange that this has been my path.
Well, and it must be helpful as well. I imagine your husband has a lot of warrior energy from that military and police background. So even, as a woman who is involved with this, what I'll call quasi-legal microdosing company out of Colorado, there also must be a sense of safety in having a partner that has your back and will protect you and will be there to support you in case there are any challenges beyond what you've currently navigated that may be more difficult in nature. And I think that probably also provides a level of security and safety and courage in what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think something that also helps tremendously for him is that he's had his own transformation.
Right.
So he's navigated through PTSD and, from being in the military, infantry, actually been in war, and he's seen a huge transformation within himself. And then also other, police officers who are no longer involved with the police, like them as well, as soon as they leave using the medicine. And seeing massive transformation through them and seeing through what it's doing for veterans, for PTSD. I think that, again, he's navigating his own road, but there's so much undeniable proof in what it's doing for people that I think it's been easier every single day for him to create the shift. Yeah.
So Tiffany, I'm going to go back to you. And just for the listeners at home, we're recording this. We have one mic for Rachel and Tiffany because most people are listening to this audio only. Some may see the video, but so anytime I'm like, Tiffany, I'm back to you. Rachel, I'm back to you. They actually have to move the mic between them to make sure it's properly set up. So this is just me buying time in between. So what's interesting about this episode and what we talked about prior to starting is we haven't really had an episode with people who are representing a company that's openly selling microdoses. And I'd love if you could provide our listeners with a little more context around what does that market look like right now? What else is out there, if you will? You don't have to name companies necessarily, but just giving people a general gist of kind of what is available, what's out there, and what choices and decisions have Golden Rule made to differentiate or stand out in sort of an ocean of other companies as more and more folks are making chocolates and making microdoses and, starting Instagram pages and openly selling this. Provide a little bit more context on the sea that we're swimming in, but also what, type of fish Golden Rule is.
Yeah. So I would say to start with that, Golden Rule has really differentiated ourselves in a way where it's a much more personal sort of brand. If you even look at the imagery and the type of branding that the product represents itself as, it meets the eye of a lot of just lifestyle, normal day-to-day kind of experience of how we live our lives. And I think kind of Rachel touched on that a little bit of how it's inviting to a lot more of a variety of people. And so I think in the landscape that we're sort of swimming in, obviously legalities and underground and everything along those lines, that's always top of mind. And there's always in-depth discussions around how to maneuver and go about that in a way that's intentional and authentic and honest, and also still in a way that serves the community. And so what we see with a lot of other brands is sort of what you've touched on already, is there is, what I've seen at least, this more kind of psychedelic, trippy sort of feel to the aesthetics. And it's beautiful and it's amazing. And I think that gravitates a little bit more towards what it is like when you work with psychedelics to a degree. So that is fitting.
High doses of psychedelics.
High doses for the most part. Yeah, unless it's not a microdose. And that's what I really love about Golden Rule, is that it's not a psychedelic looking product. It looks like a wellness product. And that was really the intention behind, the brand of that. Yeah.
And let's provide a little bit more context on what is the general scene like with microdosing products and brands and companies? Like, what are you noticing and observing as it relates to just the broader sphere of folks who are doing this?
In terms of other companies and so I think if we take the direction of other companies, what I see most common is most companies, a microdosing company, are psilocybin products. But, here at Golden Rule, it's psilocybin and it's LSD, which we don't really see. I personally have not seen another company that's more, public facing that also provides LSD. And the quality in which the product is being provided, I think, stands out very highly. I think there's not a lot of psychedelic companies in terms of microdosing companies that are really forward-facing. I think there's a lot, obviously, underground, protection purposes, all sorts of things. And I think that Golden Rule kind of does take more of that public-facing approach. And, I think it's, I don't really know what else to say about that, but I think that's more of the approach that we've really established.
Well, and we've had Ali Shaper on the podcast before. Ali's one of my co-founders for the Microdosing Collective, right? Yep. A big part of the reason we started the Microdosing Collective as a 501c3 nonprofit was to help develop more policy around microdoses specifically, because as we've seen in Oregon, Colorado, and now New Mexico, a lot of what's being legalized or regulated, if you will, are these therapeutic sessions with high doses of psychedelics, but not necessarily consumer products. And so, Rachel, I'd love to pass this back to you and hear a little bit about, one of the big questions that folks often come to us with when they're considering different microdosing products is, how do I know what's in this? Right? Because there is no third-party testing. There is no, consumer protection in that way. So tell us a little bit about what does Golden Rule do in terms of, you don't go into as detailed or as little detail as you want, but to know that, okay, this is LSD or these are psilocybin mushrooms, how can you sort of put that trust behind it so folks know, okay, if I'm for example, going to Golden Rule and I'm purchasing this, I know I'm getting the real thing and it's going to do what I think it's going to do.
Well, we know that for sure just because all of our stuff is in-house. So when you keep everything in-house, you know what's in your home, and so I am not sure what a lot of other companies are doing out there, but if they're getting it from somebody else, they're maybe not 100% sure of what is in it or how it's growing or, any of those things. It being in-house, one reason that it's called Golden Rule, it's the main reason it's called Golden Rule, is because we want to provide the same level of product to others that we expect to take ourselves. So I would only give myself the highest quality.
Right.
And so I'm not going to give anything but that to somebody else. And so there's many steps in through our process to ensure that it is high quality, through a lot of testing that we do throughout our process to ensure that, what we're saying is in the product actually is. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in Colorado these last few years. Colorado legalized psilocybin, San Pedro, ayahuasca, iboga, 5-MeO-DMT, right, through the Natural Medicine Health Act. This was in 2022, in that November cycle. In 2023, everything was decriminalized, meaning personal possession was totally fine. And now 2024, they're starting to open license, and into 2025, opening licensed service centers and things like that. So just tell us, what is the vibe in Colorado right now as it relates to psychedelics? And what is it about being in Colorado that helps you to feel a certain level of safety in doing what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty well, of kind of that unfolding that's been happening. And so right now we're about to see these clinics pop up everywhere around Colorado. And it's just going to, as they hand out these licenses, just increase over time. I don't know how that's going to look or feel because it's just starting. But that is the current environment. As far as, it feels relaxed in some ways of that, if I mean, I remember just the other day I was walking down the streets of Denver, and a pot shop was selling mushrooms, you know? And so in some ways they had like a big sign outside of their, they had mushroom chocolate bars. And so you can kind of feel that vibe there. I mean, there's multiple events in the next couple of months being held there that are all around psychedelics. So it really does feel like it is a welcoming space for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just saw a news article the other day where they're doing speed dating
Yeah.
with microdosing.
Yep, I saw that.
And even with the Microdosing Collective, we're hosting a party at the MAPS conference. We did this for the last one in 2023. We'll do it again. And we are going to have a few sponsors, and one of them, I mean, we'll figure out the details, but one of them will likely be Golden Rule. So even at this party, we'll be able to legally pass out these microdoses. So if people want to, work with this medicine in a, I would say, quasi-recreational way, then they can do that. And Tiffany, I think that would bring me back to you for this next question, right? When it comes to microdosing, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what is the line between recreational and therapeutic, or recreational and wellness. I hear a lot of people talking about how instead of drinking alcohol, they're now microdosing. Even today, in going to this event that we're at, I took a low dose of LSD because it helps with extroversion and to be a little bit more energetic and outgoing and lift my mood. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what is that line for you between, okay, I'm just doing this for fun, I'm just doing this to go out and party, I'm just doing this to feel better, and no, I'm doing this to optimize, I'm doing this to heal my trauma, I'm doing this to get off SSRIs. Talk to me a little bit about that landscape.
Of course, yeah. So I think a lot of it comes back to what's your intention? What are you wanting to experience with the medicine? What are you wanting to utilize it for? What medicine are you desiring to work with? And I think there's a lot of controversy of recreationally working with it because of, all the data and the research and everything that's backing the therapeutic approach to working with these medicines for healing and, all the beautiful things that come with that. But I do think that there's absolutely a space where you can work with low doses, for example, at a conference that we're at today, and feel more connected and grounded and present and kind of access this more peak performance sort of experience. And that is also fantastic. That creates a lot of connection, and those relationships that you're deepening with and connecting with can really progress into something incredible. That's just one way of working with it recreationally, so to speak, but it's still intentional. It's not like you're abusing it in any way, like average, right? And would hope not. And then I would say more so, therapeutic speaking, is there is more intention, if we're still staying on the topic of low dosing, is going deeper into the body for healing, and, whether it be anxiety, depression, high levels of stress, we can throw in PTSD, addiction, all those sorts of things. Low doses are incredibly effective for that. And if we even go and sort of compare, low dose with a high dose experience, whether more healing, intentional perspective versus more recreationally, is a lot of it is some people do better with a low dose. Some people aren't always ready to go that deep into whatever it is that they might look to navigate. So I think both are effective. And even just going back to recreationally and intentionally, I think whichever path you choose, I think it's all connected. I think it's all intentional. And I think that would be the offering and the suggestion, is whether you work with it specifically intentionally for specific goals, and whether that be, healing, or that be to optimize things in business, or to create cohesion, in a family dynamic, whatever that might be. There's always intention. There's always a purpose of what you're looking to experience and what the outcome is that you're striving for.
So now putting your microdosing coach hat on, because that's a lot of what you do. Do you think microdosing can be abused?
Absolutely.
And talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I think anything can be abused. A supplement can be abused. And, I think microdosing can be abused where people start to take it every single day and start to sort of rely on it, or sort of take the pharmaceutical approach to thinking that it needs to be taken every day to be effective or for it to work. Obviously, it's, there's a lot of research and data that it's not addictive, but I think there could be this sort of reliant approach that people tend to start to take when it comes to the experiences that they start to have of feeling good or feeling open or starting to feel like I need this thing to, connect more deeply. And I think that's where it could get a little slippery. And I think the sole purpose of that is to come back. What are you utilizing it for? And what is, like, how can, whatever that thing is that you're feeling like you might need to rely on something for, what is that within you that you can start to access utilizing these medicines with to uncover so that it doesn't feel like you need something to be more expressive? How can you utilize it as a tool, as a modality that's going to, support you in processing something around that can ultimately, serve you in that setting much more effectively?
Can I disagree?
Please.
Okay. I actually don't think that it can be. I think that if you try to abuse it, you're going to be disappointed. I have never met anybody who mostly the people that I talk to, or the feedback we receive, is that people will do it for an amount of time, and then they'll stop, and then they might go back into it. But I've never met anybody who's felt called to continually do it over and over and over again. And the reason is because, yes, it may make you feel great and happy in so many ways, but it also is going to bring all the shit to the surface that needs to be brought. And at times that could become exhausting.
Right.
And so it feels like it's something for people over a certain period of time, but that anybody feels like they need a break from it at some point. So that's my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, that's a great lens because we know microdosing is not addictive. The only concern that I've heard communicated around the consistent long-term use of microdosing is may there be a potential heart valve issue. So there's been this 5-HT2B potential heart valvular issue. But even as I've talked to pharmacists about that, they say as long as you take off a week or two here and there, and you're not doing it every day and increasing dosages, because we also know with the classic psychedelics, psilocybin and LSD, that there's a tolerance buildup. And so a lot of people, if they do start to do it every day, they quickly notice, okay, I have to take more and more and more and more. And most folks don't really want to, spend that much money on just taking more and more and more and more. So it has this sort of, that's what I love about it. It has this natural harmony built into it. Where it does seem to be helpful and accretive. And as you said, and we talk about this in our own programs as well, it's like the bliss, the joy, the love, the openness, that's all great. But there's also quite a bit of shadow work that can, open up on it. And that's because a lot of folks who are coming into microdosing are, maybe they've been on SSRIs before, which has shut down their emotional variance. So normally they're a 1 to 10. SSRIs will bring that down to a 3 to 7. And microdosing just opens that up again. And so, yeah, you do get happier, but you also may experience more sadness, more grief, more of the repressed emotions that have been under the surface. And I think that goes back to your point about that golden rule is not just a product company, but you're also providing support and education, because having a coach or a therapist or a practitioner or a facilitator that you're working with as part of microdosing, I think is imperative to feel supported in that process, because when things are great, but when things get messy, it can really help to have another human to reflect back to you and help you to navigate what might be coming up for you.
Yeah. And, going back to a question you had earlier, it's like you asked me how I navigate it. And, something that came to me that really is like almost like the North Star for me. And I'm assume it is for you too, is that we receive messages from people every single day of how much this has completely changed their lives. I mean, going from suicidal to loving life, going from being on a medication that was only making them feel numb to life, to being so excited to get out of bed and feel like infinite possibilities every single day, to overcoming anxiety and depression. And I mean, the list is truly endless. And so when you're able to truly see the massive impact that it has, I mean, that's what I'm here for. I'm sure it's what you're here for too.
And I think that's what allows a certain level of courage in doing that. The work that, work that we're doing is a lot of folks who get involved in this work feel like they are standing up for something.
Mm-hmm.
They know how useful and effective it is.
Uh-huh.
And it feels like now is the perfect storm because we're now also seeing the legal landscape and legal policy change around it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the conversations that I've had with people who have ties into the DEA, as an example, it is known now at the highest levels that mushrooms in particular, but some of these entheogenic plant medicines as well, aren't abusive. They aren't addictive. They actually have massive benefits. And so that's why we've seen the DEA really stay zeroed in on fentanyl and cocaine. And they haven't done anything about these microdosing companies. They haven't done anything about people who are openly selling chocolates and things like that, which, again, there needs to be consumer protection. We need to know what's in these. But that's also what Third Wave has always been, is a great sort of curator. And it's why I wanted to have you both in the podcast to talk about Golden Rule, because, for us to back a company that is openly selling microdoses is quite a risk. And so the trust that we've established to know that folks are getting what they're getting, I think, can be life-changing and transformative for those who choose to take that path.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about Golden Rule, we've talked about the brand, the aesthetic, the approach, your story, Colorado. I would shift it back to Tiffany now and ask a little bit about, what's your sense of how the next, let's say, just 2 or 3 years might unfold as it relates to microdosing supplement, sort of this landscape. How do you see the growth of Golden Rule as a representative? How do you want to support the growth of Golden Rule?
Yep.
Clearly, this isn't a company where it's just scale at all costs because of some of the risks and challenges involved. So I'd love to hear you talk about, from both a business but also a product or a therapeutic perspective, like, how do you see this continuing to grow and unfold? What other, for example, product lines might you be interested in opening up? Are we going to do an LSD and creatine gummy? Talk to me a little bit about the next few years, how you see that unfolding.
So much excitement to come. In terms of the landscape with microdosing, I think we're starting to see it now already. Microdosing obviously is very mainstream at this point. And I think if we take the pharmaceutical approach, and, I have a background in that world. I also was on antidepressants. Microdosing significantly served a purpose in me getting off Adderall and Lexapro. And so that's really near and dear to my heart, of how many people that it's now reaching as well. And so I think that is absolutely a direction that it's heading. It's already there, but more so, along the lines of it being a holistic alternative option for people that they now have that awareness that this exists. And that's, mainly because of all the higher therapeutic research and data that's coming, and that supports microdosing in its own way. But, the mainstream of where we're at today. So I think that's really a main direction, is people knowing that this exists and learning how to work with this and learning how to optimize the way that you can work with it, whether it's for therapeutic healing, alleviating, tapering off antidepressants, never having to go on antidepressants to begin with because you went this direction.
Right.
I think that's absolutely the future of where this is heading, more, short term. I would say in terms of where Golden Rule is and the future with Golden Rule and everything is, our goal and our mission and our intention is to serve the community at the highest capacity. And that looks like, educational programs, everything we spoke about in that regard. But being a trusted quality resource for the community. And that can look many different ways. And there are so many options of what that could look like. I would say in terms of product development, I think there has been some discussion, obviously, with us and our partnership and everything along the potential lines of bringing in more, creatine and LSD as an option. So that's more long-term. I think right now, Golden Rule started as a microdosing company in terms of a mushroom microdosing company. And, then we brought in LSD and kind of widened the product line. And that feels really grounded and stable and anchored and enough for where we are and how we love to serve in that capacity. And we're excited to see, what a partnership like ours could potentially evolve into.
Yeah, and just to have a moment with the name Golden Rule, you mentioned it before, but if our listeners don't know, the Golden Rule is to treat others as you wish to be treated, to do unto others as you wish was done unto you. And it feels like that's so apt. It's such a great way to think about microdosing, because I know if I had a family member or a close friend who came to me and they were at this, fork in the road, and they had a sort of traditional psychiatrist or therapist, which was like, get on SSRIs.
Yep.
And they came to me, I would never tell them to go on SSRIs. I would say maybe try ketamine. Ketamine is a really good legal option, and it's shown to have incredible antidepressant effects. But then if you're looking to work with something consistently, look at microdosing as an opening into understanding what's really going on beneath the surface, and not treating it just as a way to just take a pill to forget every ill. That's what I've often said in the past, but it's really a way to, it's an intelligence, it's an ally that we are working with in relationship to uncover these aspects of ourselves that we've hidden away or that we've repressed, so we can actually come into wholeness. And by coming into wholeness, come into, our full capacity for greatness and love and creativity and, all these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Rachel, final question for you is I would ask you the same question that I asked Tiffany is, as someone who is involved with Golden Rule, what are you most excited about, optimistic about? What has you sort of being propelled in the future as it relates to supporting the evolution of microdosing and accessibility for these medicines?
Exactly that. Just, more accessibility, because, for me, it's how many people can we help, and not just Golden Rule. How many, everybody in this space, in this mission, how many lives can we impact? How many lives can we touch? And, that's what is really exciting for me, is seeing it get out, the word get out more and more and more. I just had a lady, she was giving me a facial, and she was like, what do you do? And I was talking to her about it, and she's like, that is so funny. I just read about something like that, about microdosing in this golf magazine. I don't know what golf magazine.
Golf Digest.
Okay.
Because now professional golfers, like on the PGA Tour, are taking low doses of LSD and mushrooms to help them with their golf game.
There we go. And that is exciting.
Right.
Because that is touching the everyday person and helping them see it in a different perspective. So maybe they wouldn't have been open to it before, but now they are. And now we have an opportunity for them to experience it and for it to impact their lives and to elevate their lives and to really make a difference. And so that's what I'm excited about.
So one final question, and either of you can answer this. Maybe I'll let you catfight over it. That might be fun and exciting as a podcast tangent. One thing that I've often talked about or mentioned is microdosing is a great supplement. It really helps with BDNF, neuroplasticity. It can help with our stress response, helping to regulate the nervous system. It can help with, seem to have an impact on inflammation. It's anti-inflammatory. And I talk about it in the same way that I would creatine or lion's mane or fish oil or, other supplements like that. And yeah, I would also say that the ideal is that we can live in a world where microdosing becomes not as necessary. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that, about what's the world that you hope for, you envision. I mean, Rachel, maybe this is great for you because you have 2 kids, for your kids to grow up in, where sure, microdosing is accessible, but maybe it's not as needed because people aren't suffering and struggling as much. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, what would be those ideals or that utopia from your lens?
Oh my gosh, I almost have too much to say there. I might hand that to Tiffany, because I do have 2 kids, and I feel like this is something I think about all the time. Into, first of all, a world that is so distracted. And, I have a 12-year-old, so we're right on the cusp of like, get a phone, not get a phone, get a phone, not get a phone. We haven't gotten a phone. And it's a constant conversation because every single one of her friends has a phone.
Right.
And it feels like a very disconnected world in a lot of ways. And, my hope is that there's a huge shift there, because when we're disconnected, we're not just disconnected in where our attention is. We're disconnected in heart. We're disconnected in our thoughts and really being present in the world. And so, I think something that's really beautiful about, utilizing these supplements is that, and, most of the time I call it a medicine. I just want to say that.
Right.
But through how we work with Golden Rule, we've kind of shifted that, because medicine can feel very disconnected for people. So, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, because I kind of swap between those words. But for me, it's a medicine. And I really feel like it brings you to such awareness and presence. And my hope is that we can get back to that place, because I really do think that will make a massive difference when people wake up and get off their phones and actually start to look out into the world and become more aware of what is actually going on, and being more present and opening their hearts. And, I think that we weren't meant to constantly be on the medicine. I think that it's meant to be a medicine and work its magic and heal and bring us back to who we truly are. And, which is a place of more love, more peace, more compassion, more empathy. And I would love to see that be the world that my kids live in.
Tiffany, anything to add?
Gosh, that's beautiful. It's hard to add from that place. The thing with microdosing is you don't need a coach. You don't need somebody at home walking you through this experience. And so could it slip through the cracks because of that approach? Maybe. But through the work that we're doing and the education that we're bringing of informing people around how much more of a expansive experience that you could have when you learn how to work with it, whether that is with a coach or a therapist or what have you, how much more that can optimize and elevate your life in a lot of ways, especially for those people that are new. I don't think that it will fall through the cracks. I just don't. Even from someone who's been microdosing for 8 years, I still see the value in that. Do I microdose on my own? Of course. Do I have a coach? Sometimes, but not for microdosing. But I utilize that with other directions. Maybe I'm in therapy and, that microdosing is supporting me deepening into that. Maybe I'm in the sauna and I'm doing modalities like breath work and cold plunge. There's something to pair it with. So it's never this push to the side standalone practice in my perspective. I would also add that, to kind of piggyback off what Rachel shared a little bit more, if we think of AI, right, and the phones and just everything that's so available to us, how can we stay plugged in and connected and utilize that in a way where we're not reliant on it, but we're utilizing a powerful substance in medicine like microdosing to deepen into presence and intention of how we're utilizing these outward technologies, for example, to optimize the way that we want to receive information and build a business, for example, or connect more deeply with a family member or a partner, what have you. So that would be my, that'd be my perspective on it.
Yeah, it's like an integrative approach, right? We can't think of it as this. I love how you said this standalone modality that is out there. It's really something that is woven in.
Yeah.
And Jim Fadiman, who's been a mentor of mine, and many folks know of Jim as sort of the OG of microdosing. He's been talking a lot about lately on podcasts about how there are very few things that seem to have wide systemic benefits. And it seems like microdosing is having wide systemic benefits. But if you actually dig into it, well, what does have wide systemic benefits? Well, if you get better sleep, that's going to have a lot of systemic benefits. If you change your diet and start eating healthier, that's going to have a lot of wide systemic benefits. If you start exercising more, moving more, sweating more, that's going to have wide systemic benefits. And I think microdosing, and I would say general psychedelic use, seems to fall within that as well. And so really looking at this as a lifestyle, really looking at this as a tool that we have in our toolkit when we need it, but there's not necessarily a reliance or dependence on it. And it can be woven in to help. Again, I think a lot of the systemic benefits are it helps to lower inflammation. And in that lowering inflammation, we have more neuroplasticity, we have greater cognition, we have, greater agency to do what it is that we came here to do. So For listeners who want to learn more, goldenrulemushrooms.com is a great website. We'll have more details. We have sort of codes for that. If you want to like go ahead and commit. I think that code is third wave, one word. So you can use the code third wave on goldenrulemushrooms.com. Any other places that you'd like to point folks to go or check out after they finish listening to this episode?
I would say if anybody's on medication and they're looking to microdose, I would say the Microdosing Institute. That's something that I follow. That's supplement and any contraindications of what you cannot microdose with. That's a great resource that's constantly being updated. If you haven't shared that with your audience, I'm sure you have. But that would be my addition. Yeah.
Just to know the contraindications. And if you are on pharmaceutical medications and you do want to microdose, make sure you do so under the guidance of a medical professional. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Rachel and Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. Rachel, it's great to have you on. Tiffany, it's great to have you back. And folks, check out goldenrulemushrooms.com. Rachel, any final words?
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Paul.
goldenrulemushrooms.com.
Appreciate you.
Use the code third wave to get 10% off. Thanks. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. The psychedelic space is evolving every day, and we have a ton of amazing content that's coming out, and subscribing is the best way to keep up to date with all of that great content.